So welcome to everyone. Today we have a rather packed agenda. We will first of all have an overview given by our CEO, Adrian Schatzman. Then I will give you a couple of insights about our working group Legal Sustainability. We will then proceed with a couple of questions we received in the meantime since we last did our webinar on the implementation of self-regulations, and provide you answers that were already validated by our experts committee. We will then have a time for live questions. For that purpose, please use the Q&A function, and then we will conclude. So I suggest we start, and Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guillaume, and good morning, everybody. The overview sounds big, but what I'm going to talk about is just I want to give you an update about the development in the field of sustainability with a view to our particular self-regulation. What is the current discussion? Where do we stand in our exchange with the federal administration? Guillaume, if you can move to the next. Yes, as a starting point, we believe that in Bern, in the federal administration, in the SIF, there are three options being discussed with a view how to regulate sustainability and in particular the greenwashing topic. Option one is a rule-based, very detailed regulation. Option two, probably very much in the Swiss tradition, a rather high-level principle-based regulation. Or option three, we build on and build out the self-regulation that exists in the industry. In the industry, we currently have a self-regulation in the field of sustainability from the Swiss Bankers Association. This self-regulation focuses at the point of sale, whereas the other self-regulation, ours, the one from AMAS, focuses both on the entity level and on the product level. Together, I think we cover the value chain fairly well. If you look a bit ahead, we expect the Federal Council to decide on one of these options, maybe it's also a blend, by the end of this year. However, the discussions have already started. We're in the middle of it, and we expect that the SIF will establish a recommendation for the Federal Council as early as August. Now, what is our view? How do we tackle this as the Asset Management Association? Our current position, and it's not only a position of AMAS, it's one that is shared by the Swiss Bankers Association, but also the insurance associations. As you see that as an industry, we are aligned. Our position is no fundamentally against a principle-based regulation, certainly not. We certainly wouldn't welcome any detailed regulation, but also in the long term, there may be a good reason and to establish a principle-based regulation. However, this is not the right time for this. And here are thoughts. The topic of sustainability, greenwashing, that is so dynamic and it's internationally moving at a very fast pace. Sustainability definitions, terminology, that is all evolving and hopefully also converging globally. But for now, to put in a law where we are today would be the wrong time. If you look at how long it takes to establish a law in Switzerland, in particular for such a controversial topic as sustainable finance, we talk about 5 to 7 years. And one thing is for sure, by the time this law would come into effect, it would be already outdated. So self-regulation is the much more adequate instrument. That's our conviction. It's fast, it's agile, it's flexible. We can reflect, we can amend international and include international development. And it's also very close to the business. It's a self-regulation written by you, by asset managers, by the industry, for the industry. And I think that's also very important because it just helps to increase acceptance. So in short, we maintain that view. For now, no regulation. Let us establish and further work out the self-regulation. If you can move to the next one, please. Now, if I narrow the time horizon, where are we right now? We have established a working group at AMAS, and probably some of you are also represented in that working group, with a goal to amend the current self-regulation to also reflect some of the well-justified expectations and requests from the federal administration. Guillaume will talk a bit about this later on in greater detail, but this is where we are. We have drafted an amendment to the self-regulation, and we'll share that with the SIF. The key, by the end of this month, presumably, the key element is how do we define going forward sustainability? That is a discussion that we don't want to have in isolation within the Asset Management Association. But as I said earlier on, we have a very close exchange and collaboration with the Insurance Association, with the SBA, because one thing is for sure, we don't want to have a definition that just works, for example, on a product level, but not at the point of sale. This needs to be consistent. This needs to come out of one hand. And finally, before I pass on to Guillaume, we're talking now about amendments to the self-regulation. But let me be very clear here. Whatever is to be amended, it won't change anything that is now in the current self-regulation with a view to the effective date, end of September. If there are changes, they will only become effective later on. So we're not moving goalposts while implementing the self-regulation. And with this, Guillaume, I hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. So moving on, and as mentioned by Adrian, very quick updates on our working group, Legal Sustainability. We met for the past month quite a lot in order to provide the SIF with an amended version of our self-regulation. What do we plan to amend? Well, basically, there are 5 areas. First of all, the definition, the sustainability policy, further clarifications, that's Article 17, the reporting, and the enforcement. As mentioned by Adrian previously, obviously, the AMAS governance will have to be respected for any amendments to the existing self-regulation, which means as mentioned, that we are not moving goalposts and that the self-regulation will enter into force this September. We will obviously keep you posted of any developments in this regard. And maybe we can just provide you with a very good slide that was prepared by our friends at SBA, which shows the global picture. So here you have all the association's activities mapped with the 15 measures of the Federal Council of last December. So yeah, we have the three main associations, SBA, AMAS, and SIA. And underneath you have all the various business segments and all the additional measures and the additions to the existing measures. And in the blue circles, you have the reference to the measure number of the Federal Council report of last December. This slide shows that we are going forward, we are moving swiftly, and that we are covering almost all of the measures of the Federal Council. That being said, I suggest we move forward and we tackle the questions and answers. This shows that some of our members are currently implementing the self-regulation, and we took the liberty to choose, to pick and choose a couple of questions that we think that are of interest for all the members. So let's jump to question 1. In question 1, we have 3 different funds. We have ABC fund, XYZ fund, and Omega fund. ABC fund is falling under the AMAS and the AMAS self-regulation, as it includes exclusion and integration. Whereas XYZ fund only has exclusion and Omega fund only has integration. The question here is, does XYZ fund, the one who only has exclusion, have to mention explicitly in the fund documentation that it's not sustainable or sustainably managed? It was kind of a chicken and egg problem, but as XYZ fund is not submitted to the AMAS self-regulation and is only doing exclusion, we came to the conclusion that in case of a pure exclusion, you don't need to state that the fund is neither sustainable nor sustainably managed. That being said, we have 3 caveats that are listed below. The first one, if you have no reference to sustainability, well, then the existing prospects or fund documentation don't have to be amended. Number 2, if there is a reference to sustainability, then it must be clearly stated. And last and not least, number 3, if the fund name refers to sustainability lato sensu, then it has to be changed. I didn't mention that before, but all the questions we are giving answers today, most of them have been validated by our experts committee, and they will be included in our FAQ. That means during the next week, we will keep you posted, but the FAQ will be updated. That means we will have a FAQ V3. So here we have the answer to question number 1. Again, in case of pure exclusion, there is no need to state that the fund is neither sustainable nor sustainably managed, with the 3 caveats I mentioned before. Let's move on to the second question. The second question is a question on our FAQ. It's a question of pension funds. So basically the question is a Swiss asset manager, member of AMAS, submitted to the AMAS self-regulation that manages pension fund assets, is a foreign asset manager, so presumably EU in that case. That means not submitted to the AMAS self-regulation, also under scope. Here, for the ease of reference, I have the question in German. The answer to that question, that was also validated by our experts committee, is that, as mentioned in our previous webinar, only the pension fund assets are concerned by AMAS self-regulation. The pension schemes, Vorsorgeeinrichtungen, are not under scope, as stated by the FAQ. So that means, in a nutshell, that only the Swiss asset managers member of AMAS is concerned. That means a foreign asset manager doesn't have to comply with AMAS self-regulation. Obviously, and as you all understood, in case of delegation, the EU asset manager will have to comply with EU law. So here you have the answer. Again, only pension funds assets are concerned by the self-regulations. The pension schemes themselves are not under scope. So that means only Swiss asset managers, members of AMAS, are concerned. And again, the caveat that obviously in case of delegation, the EU asset managers will have to comply with the EU law. Let's move on to question 3. Question 3 is a question about Article 26, paragraph 5. As you all remember, Article 26 is the article about the further clarifications. So here we had a very concrete question from a member asking us, does this paragraph apply in case of collective investment schemes that are reserved to qualified investors and potentially exempt from the prospectus requirement. The second question we received regarding this paragraph was that if the exclusion criteria exclusively concerns controversial weapons, is this sufficient is this sufficient? The answer to those two questions is that in case of collective investment schemes reserved to qualified investors, there is no need for a prospectus, and de facto Article 26, paragraph 5 does not apply. However, and according to FINMA practice, the information notice, the appendix, has to reflect this. So no need to amend the prospectus, but you will have to reflect it into the appendix. Regarding question 2, simply excluding companies active in controversial weapons business is not sufficient to justify a reference from the exclusion criteria. So here you have the answer. So again, no need to amend the prospectus, but however, you should reflect it in the information notice, and controversial weapons exclusion is not enough to justify a reference from the exclusion criteria. Let's jump to question 4. And with that, Aurelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guillaume. So question 4 is a question about Article 25, paragraph 4, where basically the English version of this article said that the fund regulations or company agreement must set out the minimum proportion of investments that must meet the sustainability requirements defined in the investment policy. Precisely the minimum threshold of investment that must be managed with reference to sustainability in accordance with the investment policy. So here, the question was about this minimum proportion of investment that must meet the sustainability requirements, and the signification of this precisely in the English version, asking whether how this precisely should be interpreted, knowing that in the French version, for instance, we have an ainsi que. So here, and it's the case for everything, I mean, for the entire AMA's self-regulation, when there is a doubt about a specific term in a non-German version, so in a French or in the English translation, the self-regulation that is the reference and remains the reference legally is the German one. So here in the German version, we have, and if we can move maybe to the next slide, we have a Beziehungsweise that for those two specific clause, so that answers basically the question on the precisely. If we move now to the question 5, we have a question about if an AMAS members communicates or reports ESG types of KPIs on a voluntary basis, while basically not pursuing any sustainability strategy in the fund or not having any ESG reference in the fund documentation, is there a risk of greenwashing there? So the mere fact basically of reporting ESG types of reporting or KPIs, and how it should be addressed. So here the answer is very clear for us, and the working group has been also looking at that in details. There is no, from the moment there is an ESG, I mean, pure ESG reporting with the explicit mention that the fund is not sustainable nor sustainability managed, in light of AMA self-regulation, doesn't present, in our view, a risk of greenwashing. It's important to note that, of course, ESG reporting can be made across all types of investment, but this explicit mention that the fund is not sustainable and is not sustainably managed is crucial here. Question 6 and last question from the different questions we've received in the context of the implementation that we've selected is the scope. Are real estate funds under in scope for the self-regulation? And the answer is yes, they are. Real estate funds are in the scope, and actually they are also subject to specific KPIs. So those are the environmental friendly KPIs that were published last year in May, and they are a crucial part, and they are part of the self-regulation.
Thanks a lot, Aurelia. We had a couple of questions lately about the timing. So that's why I think it's in interest of everyone that we mention once more the timing that we have. As mentioned by Adrian, the self-regulation will enter into force in September this year. At the end of December, we have the entry into force of the real estate KPIs, as mentioned by Aurelia. Then in Q1 or Q2 2024, we have a possible entry into force of the revised CESA and CESO. That's the LQIF related revision. And then in Q3 2024, we have two points. First, the amendments to the fund regulations, the company agreement or prospectus, that will have to be submitted to FINMA. And the second one is the existing delegation and sub-delegation agreements under Article 14 and 24 that must be amended. So in brief and in a nutshell, all new products must comply after the 30th of September 2023 with the self-regulation, and all existing products have until September 2024 to amend their fund documentation. That's on the timing. And now we can move to the live questions. Are we sharing the slides or amending? Are we sharing the slides with the participants? Yes, we will share the slides. And as mentioned, next week, we will also amend the FAQ to reflect the questions that we answered today. I see there is another question. I'm reading. What are the minimum SFDR requirements that must be met in order for the AMAS self-regulatory requirements to be disregarded? Article 9. SFDR is disclosure-oriented. AMAS self-regulation focuses on organizational requirements. Well, we have different components. It's not only organizational requirements, and I think we can refer in that respect to Article 20. I'm looking for my article right now. So I think that the principle is that when you comply with EU law, you're deemed compliant with the AMAS self-regulation, right? That's Article 9. So obviously all our members that are active on a EU cross-border basis and that have branches or subsidiaries in Europe and already comply with EU law are deemed compliant with AMAS self-regulation. That's the first question received. A second one, can you please confirm that there are no need to amend the fund contract prospectus of the single investment funds, non-public funds, looking at the ManCo perspective? That's an excellent question. I don't think they're out of scope per se from the self-regulation. I'll have to look into that. Maybe that's something we can discuss with our expert committee as well. My gut feeling is that they can be excluded, but I need to be 100% sure. So I think the question is interesting, and we will take it into the FAQ as well. Okay, I see a question. 30th of September 2024 as effective date for all products. Is it sufficient that prospectus is submitted to FINMA? They don't have to be approved by FINMA, but they date correct. I think that was the case for the first amendments that to be done with FINMA. We can liaise with FINMA on the topic, but usually it's the case they have to be submitted to the FINMA by the state. But that's also a very interesting and hands-on question, so we can we can liaise with FINMA on the topic, and we will keep you posted. I see another question. What about the future Swiss RAIF? That's the LKIF. Must they comply with the AMAS self-regulation? Well, LKIFs are out of scope from FINMA authorization and surveillance. They only have an indirect surveillance, right? Because they typically have to be the ManCo or the asset managers have to have a FINMA license. However, I think it's a very good question. LKIF that sells itself as a green LKIF, I think it would have to comply with the self-regulation. But once again, I'm not going to give away answers like this without conferring with the expert committee. I think it's a very good question that will be also included in the FAQ. Can you please define what is meant with new funds to be compliant immediately by September? Well, that's all the funds. That's all the funds that will be filed with FINMA after the 30th of September. So if you want to do a new contractual fund, and you file it on the 1st of October with FINMA, I would assume that is what we mean with a new fund. So it's not an existing product. It hasn't started yet, but you filed it on the 1st of October, and so it's a new fund. Investment companies for qualified investors are not in the scope of CISA, no financial instruments, so exempt from the AMAS self-regulation, correct? So I guess the question is going for limited partnerships. If that's the case, well, the limited partnerships fall under the scope. I think that's Article 4. I'm not sure I understand the question. Concerning Article 26, paragraph 5, if the exclusion criteria only refers to controversial weapons, is not sufficient to justify a reference to the use of exclusion criteria. May we still mention them in the fund contract or prospectus? Yes, you can mention the exclusion. You can say that you exclude controversial weapons, but then it's just not sufficient to qualify your fund as applying exclusion criteria. Aurelia, do you see a question you want to address?
I think we've addressed most of them. I don't think...
There was a last one right now. When will be the amendments and their interpretation be published by AMAS? Well, first of all, as mentioned by Adrian, we have to file this with the CIF. Then we'll have to see what's the outcome. And then we have to go through our own governance process. Obviously, we don't like keeping things in the dark. So as soon as we have the amendments, we will make them public. Okay, there was another question. When will the model fund contracts be ready for the new funds? Soon. We launched a working group 5 months ago to draft what we call the ESG Bausteine. But obviously the CIF-led working group on greenwashing popped in, and so this working group focused on our answers to the CIF and on drafting the amendments. So as you can guess, this was priority number 1. We will launch next week or the week after an increased cadence working group on that matter to provide our members with the Bausteine as soon as possible. So I think it's realistic to say by the end of July. I got more info on the question on Article 2, CISA, paragraph 3. That was the Investmentgesellschaften in Form von Aktiengesellschaften, ausschließlich für qualified investors. Don't they fall in the scope of CISA? So there are no collective assets in that sense. Well, obviously the exemptions from CISA apply, right? So if you're an investment club, if you're a form that is not under CISA, my educated guess would be that you're not falling under the AMAS self-regulation. And anyway, you shouldn't be, I think they are not mentioned in the Article 4, which defines the scope of application. So thank you for the really interesting questions. We will, as mentioned, revert to our expert committee and provide you with answers just to make sure, especially regarding the LKIF. And if that's not the case, everybody can go for lunch a little bit earlier. Let me conclude here. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to the members who agreed, who enabled us to have those questions. I think it's a value for all our members to have questions that are already answered, since you are all in the same boat. As mentioned, we will share the slides and amend the FAQ, and it will be on our website, available for everyone in the next couple of days. So that being said, I think we can draw a line. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. It's always a pleasure. Have a very nice day, and if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to send them to Aurelia or to myself. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.